Hey guys, this is Brother Ray Jones with the First Church of God in Princeton, West Virginia. I want to welcome you to our midweek Bible study. Thank you for taking time to tune in and be a part of this time of learning and growing together. I am truly grateful for your willingness to watch and participate in these studies. And I want to encourage you, as folks are tuning in, to take some time to participate in this tonight. You feel free to say amen, feel free to ask a question, feel free to use those emoji buttons on there. Let us know you're here. We have someone who will be interacting with you during this time, and I look forward to going back and giving some responses to maybe some questions or comments that you have as well. But I am extremely grateful and humbled that you will spend this time with me as we look into the Word of the Lord together. We're going to be talking tonight from two different chapters of Genesis. We're going to get in Genesis 42, verse 29, and start there, and then we'll make our way to Genesis chapter 43 and go into around verse 14 this evening. And the topic for tonight is basically in the form of this statement: been there, done that, not trying it again. Have you ever maybe said that statement? A lot of times we've heard that statement in the form of this: been there, done that, and got the t-shirt to prove it, right? Well, I've adapted that a little bit to where maybe sometimes we say, you know what, I've been there, I've done that, and I don't think I need to do that anymore. I can check that off my list, right? I feel that way currently about the marathon. Now, I am a runner. I love to run. I fell in love with this sport recreationally, not competitively, but I fell in love with this sport years ago, and I just thoroughly enjoy distance running. And somewhere along the way in my running career, I had some friends who compelled me to train for and run a marathon. Now, the marathon is 26.2 miles. I just want to be clear on that. That is one of the longer races that any running competition or any runner wants to compete in, rather. And the friends that had compelled me to do this, most of them hadn't run one. One of them had. He was all of them were experienced runners, but only one in the group had run a marathon before, and he convinced us that we could do it. So off we sat on the training for the marathon. And it takes months of training to run a marathon, at least for most of us. And we started months in advance. We had targeted a race that was in Memphis, Tennessee for St. Jude's, wonderful organization, and it's a great cause. If you're looking for a cause to support through running, the St. Jude's marathon and half marathon, I highly recommend both the race and the organization. But we started months in advance training for this race. And on race day, the time came where we were actually going to run 26.2 miles. Now, I had never done that before in my life. Even in the training that we did, we only went up to around 22 miles, maybe 24 in the training. And when you do that, you might think, well, hey, if you've done 22 or 24 miles, what's those last couple of miles to you on race day? Well, if you think that, you've never run a marathon. If you've ever run a marathon, you don't think that anymore, all right? Marathons are grueling races, and you might think that if you've gotten to a certain point, it all ought to be downhill from there. That's not necessarily the case. I can tell you beyond the shadow of any doubt that that day, nearly 20 years ago now, when my friends and I set out on that course, and we did indeed run 26.2 miles with a little bit of walking here and there, particularly at the water stops, we eventually got to the finish line, and we finished, four of us, hand in hand, crossing the finish line. That was an amazing experience for me. I count that race as one of the highlights of my life, not because I had a great record or anything like that. I definitely didn't get any winning medals. We got a medal for finishing, but for me, finishing was winning. And I just thoroughly enjoyed that experience, so much so that I did 4 more marathons after that, and was glad to do each one of those. And some of those same people that ran that first marathon with me, I was in some of those other races, those other marathons with them as well. Wouldn't trade that for any time in my life. I just thoroughly enjoyed the marathon training and running. But here's what I can safely say today. If you looked at me and said, hey, Ray, why don't you run another marathon? I'm probably going to tell you, I've been there, I've done that, and I'm probably not trying that again. I know what it takes to run a marathon, and I'm just not real careful or real anxious, I should say, to jump back in and do another one. Now, we all have experienced some things in our lives that make us want to say, been there, done that, not ready to try that again. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. And tonight we're going to look at the story of Joseph, and we're going to see from his life, and it's not actually going to be from his life, we're going to hone in a little bit on his father Jacob and see where Joseph's father Jacob teaches us some lessons about this mindset about we've been there, we've done that, and we don't want to do it again. Now, let me just tell you from the get-go, again, sometimes that mindset is healthy and good, but sometimes it hinders us from doing and experiencing some things that God wants us to experience. So thank you for tuning in with this tonight, and let's see what we can learn. We want to recap real quick with our story. As we've been studying the life of Joseph, we remember when he was 17 years old, he got sold into slavery by his brothers. 13 years later, after going 13 grueling years that Joseph experienced, he is now Pharaoh's right-hand man. He is the prime minister, if you will, of Egypt. And he's overseeing the land through some times of plenty for 7 years. And now some times of famine have set in. And Joseph is in charge of all the food in Egypt. And Egypt is the only place near or far in that region, that area, where food is available. Joseph's brothers now have to come to Egypt to buy food. They have no clue that they're about to encounter the brother they sold into slavery. For all they knew, he was dead. And when they encounter him, as we've already studied, they don't recognize him. But Joseph recognizes them. And he puts them to the test by accusing them of being spies. And as he accuses them of being spies, they start volunteering all kinds of information that's very honest and factual information about, their father's still living. They've had 11 brothers. Now one is dead, they presume, and they think that Joseph is dead. And he begins inquiring more about, is Benjamin alive and that kind of thing. And they're just offering all this information, not knowing what's going on. But Joseph knew what was going on. He was testing them, and he was wanting to see, just kind of in a sneaky way, getting updated on how his little brother and how his father's doing. He's also trying to discover, have his brothers changed any? Or are they still those hurting, conniving, untrustworthy brothers that he knew over 20 years prior? And as he puts his brothers to the test, he tells them, part of the test includes, you know what, you're going to get out of here. I'm going to keep one of you, and the rest of you are going to go home and take food to your land. And you don't come back before me again without actually bringing your brother Benjamin to prove to me that what you say is true. Well, we're going to pick the story up there, and we're going to see what we can learn. Because at this point, Simeon is a prisoner in Egypt. The other 9 brothers go back to Canaan, and they've got to tell Dad what happened. So pick it up in Genesis, the 42nd chapter, beginning of verse 29. Then they went to Jacob their father in the land of Canaan, and told him all that had happened to them, saying, The man who is Lord of the land spoke roughly to us, and took us for spies of the country. But we said to him, We are honest men, we're not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father this day in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the Lord of the country, said to us, By this I will know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me. Take food for the famine of your households, and be gone. And bring your youngest brother to me, so I shall know that you are not spies, and that you are honest men. I will grant your brother to you, and you may trade in the land. Then it happened, as they emptied their sacks, surprisingly each man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob said to them then, You have bereaved me. Joseph is no more. Simeon is no more. And now you want to take Benjamin. All these things are against me. And Reuben spoke to his father, saying, Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you. But he said, My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If any calamity should befall him along the way in which you go, then you would bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the grave. So take note of what's happening here. These boys go back and notice first, they tell their dad the truth. They don't lie. Now, they've been known to lie, haven't they? They lied about Joseph. They sold him into slavery, and they told their dad, we think an animal killed him. They covered it up. Well, they're not covering up anything now. They've grown up. They've matured. They're better men now, we believe. So far, there's some hints to that. So here are these boys telling their dad just exactly what happened. At least they didn't lie. That's a good thing. And quite honestly, Jacob's response to all this news is very understandable to me. I hope that it is to you as well. Please note, Jacob is still grieving the loss of Joseph. He believes Joseph is dead. Now, I know a few things about grief. I've lost some close loved ones, as I'm aware that probably many of you have also. I've never lost a child, and quite honestly don't want to. I've known some people who've lost a child to death. I've got some friends in Louisiana who lost 2 daughters in one tragic automobile accident. I've talked with them about how deeply that affected them and that hurt them. And that's a grief that changes, but it never goes away. It is perfectly understandable to me that Jacob is still grieving the loss of Joseph over 20 years later. And that loss has shaped him. It's affected him. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. You can't help but have the losses of your life, particularly the great losses of your life, affect you and shape how you view things and how you react to things now. So that's part of what's going on with Jacob. And he's not only grieving the loss of Joseph, but it's causing him to potentially grieve to actually grieve, rather, the potential loss of Simeon. Okay, Simeon went off with the other 9, but didn't come back. And that would be a flashback for Jacob as to what had happened to Joseph over 20 years prior. And while Simeon is alive and well, Jacob does not know that. He believes that Simeon is no more. That's a very understandable thought for him to have, okay? Plus, understand, Jacob is now much older at this point in his life. He's 20 plus years older than he was when he lost Joseph. And here is Jacob wondering, how much more can I take? Now, please hear me clearly. All of these reactions and emotions that are going on in Jacob are perfectly understandable and even normal from a human standpoint. But what we have to watch out for is that while these reactions are understandable, there's one thing that they're lacking in large supply of, and that is faith. Okay, he is operating humanly, and I'm not downing him for that. Please hear me clearly on that. But he's so focused on his losses and his potential losses that he's unable to look through the eyes of faith in what God might want to do through these circumstances. That's real easy to have happen when we've been hurt deeply. And as we get older, we're going to become more reserved, and it's just a normal tendency. But we cannot rest in that completely. We have to entertain the possibility that God could be at work even though we're older and even though we have been hurt. So let's look a little more in this story. We leave it off here with Jacob saying, you know what, we got some food for now, and you're not going back and you're not taking Benjamin away from me. I've had all I can handle. Well, look at what happens next. Jacob couldn't hold off the inevitable forever. We pick it up in Genesis 43, beginning in verse 1. Now the famine was severe in the land, and it came to pass when they had eaten up the grain which they had brought back from Egypt, that their father said to them, hey, go back and buy us a little food. But Judah spoke to him, saying, the man solemnly warned us, saying, you shall not see you shall not see my face, unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, you shall not see my face until your brother is with us. Right? Jacob has delayed the inevitable, but the inevitable's caught up with him. There's still a famine in the land, whether they liked it or not. The food that they had brought back from Egypt is now gone. If they're going to survive, they're going to have to get more food. And the only place to buy food still is in Egypt. Now, while again we can understand why Jacob is so reluctant to make this step of faith, he's being very cautious, he's being very careful, he's been hurt a lot through his life. There's still a step of faith that he needs to take. And God has a way of positioning us somewhere where we must take a step of faith. That's where Jacob is at this point. A phrase that I often think of is this: sometimes you have to need a miracle before you can get one. And Jacob and his family are being put in a position where they need a miracle and where they must reach out and act by faith. And Jacob gets reminded by his sons that, hey, we'll gladly go get some more food, but you got to understand, Benjamin must go with us. And this reminder is given to him, and Jacob gives a reaction to it. Pick it up in verse 6 of Genesis 43. And Israel said, why did you deal so wrongfully with me as to tell this man whether he had still another brother? But they said, the man asked us pointedly about ourselves and our family, saying, is your father still alive? Have you another brother? And we told him according to these words. Could we possibly have known he would say to us, bring your brother down? Okay, when Jacob gets reminded, okay, we're running out of food, you want us to go buy some more food, but we've got to take Benjamin with us. Jacob's reaction is, why did you even tell this man you had another brother? What business of that was his? And the sons just simply explained to him, He asked us a direct question. And they gave honest answers to it. Now remember, they have no clue that was Joseph who was filling them out and trying to find out what was going on. They're in the dark on all of this. We have the advantage of reading this story from a historical and faith standpoint. And it's easy for us to read this and think, well, how come they can't get this? Well, they had no clue what was going on. And Jacob took it out on his grown children. Now think about that with me for a moment. Jacob forgot at this point that he was talking to grown men. Now they were still his kids, and he was still their father. And please hear me tonight. If you are a parent, you will always be your child's parent. And if you got parents who are still living, I don't care how old you are, your mom and dad will always be your mom and dad. Okay? But once we become full grown, once our kids become full grown, we need to understand the relationship is supposed to change. Jacob forgot that his kids were grown men now. And that is really easy to do. My kids are currently 29 and 26. My son, Caleb, is 29. My daughter is 26. She'll be 27 really, really soon. And I got to be honest with you. Sometimes when I look at them through the lens of I'm their dad and they're 10 years old again. I think it was Subaru who made this amazing commercial some years ago of this little girl sitting in the driver's seat of a vehicle, and her dad's talking to her, telling her, to be careful, to use her mirrors and make sure she has her seatbelt on, drive the speed limit, don't check text messages. Now, obviously, this little 6-year-old girl that you see at this point, you think, what is going on? There's no way this girl could drive a vehicle. Then in the last scene of the commercial, they show the reality that this girl is 18 years old and about to go off to college. And she says, okay, Dad, I got it. I'm going to do all those things. And the whole point is that the dad still sees her as 6 years old. Man, that's a tear-jerking commercial. It strikes to my heart, I know. And I get it. That's how we see our kids sometimes, but that's not fair to them or to us. My kids are 29 and 26. They're getting old. I'm not. They're getting old. But I've learned a few things about trying to be a parent to adult children. And just real quickly, let me tell you, I found out while raising my kids that I had to grow up as my kids grew up. I didn't have it near as together as I thought I had until I had kids and was responsible for them. And that took me to a new level of awareness of the person I was not yet and who I needed to be and to become in order to parent them well. I also realized not only did I have to grow up with my kids, but I had to let my kids grow up as well. I had to let them sometimes suffer the consequences of their decisions. I also needed to be sure that they got the credit and the rewards from good decisions that they were making. I had to let my kids grow up. And just hear me tonight, it's hard to let your kids grow up. I understand that, particularly when we're watching them make decisions that we believe are unwise. But while there are some times when we need to step in and intervene, we also need to let them grow up. Because the only thing that hurts worse than watching our kids grow up is watching them not grow up. Watching them stay immature and not accept the responsibilities of adulthood when they should. And then they would then turn into dependence long beyond the time in life when they need to be dependents. And there's enough of that going on in the world. Let's not go there, okay? I've also found this out now that my kids are adults. I may need to question some of their decisions, but I don't need to question all of them. They're grown. And in some areas of life, they know better than I do. I'm still their dad. And I'm going to carefully and cautiously pose some questions from time to time. But I'm learning not to question everything that they've got going on. It just doesn't help anything at all. Jacob forgot that these were grown men. And when he starts asking them, hey, why did you tell this guy in Egypt all our business? He didn't even entertain the idea that they were directly asked a question by who we know to be Joseph. They had acted responsibly and honestly. Jacob just had to question them about it. Well, as we read on in the story, in verses 8 through 14 of Genesis 43, we find out that Jacob ends up acting by faith. Now, he steps out on faith again, but he does so kind of reluctantly. But to his credit, he still does it. Okay, let's pick it up there. Genesis 43:8 says, Then Judah said to Israel, his father, Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. I myself will be surety for them. From my hand you shall require them. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. For if we had not lingered, surely by now we could have returned this second time. Their father Israel said to them, If it must be so, then do this. Take some of the best of the fruits of the land in your vessels and carry down a present for the man. A little balm, a little honey, spices and myrrh, pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double money in your hand and take back in your hand the money that you returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take your brother also and arise and go back to the man. And may God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may release your other brother and Benjamin. If I am bereaved, I am bereaved. So look at what happens here. The reality of the situation calls for action. Israel has to do something. Jacob has to do something. Judah helped compel his father to action and said, hey, you know what? I will take responsibility for Benjamin. And that was a good thing for Judah to do, and it helped Jacob along the way as well. Jacob also suggests that they take some gifts. That's not a bad thing. He's wanting them to take gifts of appreciation and just let them know, that they're acting in goodwill. He's not trying to bribe or anything like that. He's just showing actions of good faith, in my estimation anyway. He also tells them to take double money with them in case that money that they brought back from before, that they didn't know they were bringing back until they got back, he said, take that money. It may have been an oversight, and that way you're showing in good faith that you are honest men. All of this is good steps all of these are good steps of faith that Jacob is taking at this point. And even though he's doing so reluctantly, it is to his credit that he is acting on what little faith he has in this moment. And even if he just has a little bit of faith, he did act on it. That, my friends, is a good thing. And he even goes so far as saying, in my estimation, a statement of faith. If I'm bereaved, I am bereaved. He is trusting God as best he can, and it's not an easy step for him to make. Now, please hear me tonight. I believe that God will compel us to take some steps of faith at various points in our lives. And even if we just have a little bit of faith in that moment, please, my friend, trust God with that little bit of faith and step out on it. Now, as we close this out tonight, I want us to consider these few thoughts. One is this. The older we get, the less likely we are to want to change or risk things. Can I get an amen there? Amen. I'm right there with you. The older I get, the less risk I want to take. Hey, I'm older now. I'm not sure I'm ever going to run any more marathons. And by the way, when it comes to marathons and some other things, that might be okay. It's just not easy as we get older to change. We feel like we have more at risk at that. We have more to lose at that point, at those points in life. And we've just become so familiar with things that we don't want to change. I'm not saying that's the way we ought to be. I'm saying that's just kind of the way it naturally goes to. There are some things in life where it is okay to say, you know what, I've been there, I've done that, and I'm not going there again. I've checked that off my list. If it comes to certain physical limitations of things that you can't do anymore when you were younger, it is good and right to accept that, to grieve those losses and to move on. But when it comes to things of faith, even though we're older, and even though maybe we've been hurt before, we need to be in tune with God and still step out on faith as He directs us. We never get too old to walk by faith. Jacob, though he'd been greatly hurt and though he's up in years now, he had to be compelled by his circumstances and by his sons to step out on faith and do what needed to be done. My friends, we have to step out on faith regardless of our age. These steps of faith Jacob is taking are preparing the way for great blessings. He just doesn't know that yet. Now, we know it because we've probably read on ahead in the story. We know that eventually Jacob's going to find out that Joseph is still alive, and there's going to be this great reunion, and that there's going to be so many blessings on the other side of this step of faith that Jacob's got to take. He just doesn't see that yet. The question that you and I must ask and answer at whatever point of life we're in right now, is there a step of faith that God's asking us to take? And maybe our past experiences are hurtful and we just don't want to risk it anymore. But it's still a step of faith. God's saying, come on, believe me again. Trust me again. The thing about faith is you got to step out on it in order to get to the other side and see what blessings God may have in store. And you won't get to those blessings until you step out on that faith. I don't know where you are at in life. I don't know what past experiences may have shaped you. I don't know how many of those experiences may have hurt you. And please hear me, I'm truly sorry for your pain, whatever that may be. But I would encourage you tonight to prayerfully consider again, is there a step of faith God is asking you to take? And will you take it for His glory? Will you trust Him again? Trust Him with your hurts. Trust Him with your future. And will you experience the blessings that He has on the other side? Thank you for your time and attention tonight. I appreciate both. I hope you've received a blessing from this. And I look forward to continuing this study in the life of Joseph with you next week. God bless you and have a great night.